Everyone hates the DMV line. But while you were quietly suffering, someone else was trying to register a stolen golf cart with whiteout or take a vision test with a live parrot. Today, we expose the 101 absolute dumbest, most absurd, and completely unhinged things real people have actually tried to pull off at the DMV. You will never look at that waiting room the same way again. 1. Picture walking into the lobby at 8 in the morning only to find a guy standing in line wearing absolutely nothing but a giant wooden barrel with shoulder straps. He loudly argued that since he was born without identification or clothes, his natural state should exempt him from all standard state paperwork. 2. Customer service reached a whole new level of hell when a furious dude tried to pay a massive registration debt entirely in loose nickels. He dragged 3 heavy industrial buckets across the tile floor and screamed about constitutional tender laws when the terrified clerk refused to count 6,000 coins by hand. 3. One bold applicant decided the best way to conquer the written knowledge exam was to bring his pet parrot as a designated study buddy. He actually claimed the bird was his certified life coach, who just happened to squawk the correct multiple-choice answers until security threw them both out into the street. 4. You really have to question the survival instincts of the driver, who arrived for his road test in a rusty sedan, completely wrapped in thick aluminum foil. He failed the exam instantly after refusing to uncover his windshield, because he insisted the local traffic cameras were trying to steal his personal thoughts. 5. Boredom makes people do crazy things, but cracking open a full home perm kit in the crowded waiting area is absolute insanity. The intense chemical stench became so overwhelmingly toxic that the branch manager thought there was an underground gas leak and forced an immediate evacuation of the entire government building. 6. Counterfeiting is usually a precise criminal art, but one absolute clown just handed over a piece of ripped cardboard with his face drawn on it in green crayon. He even glued a sparkly gold star next to his misspelled name, hoping the exhausted staff would just process it without asking any follow-up questions. 7. Some lunatic demanded to take his driving test using a steering wheel. He ripped out of a dusty arcade cabinet from 1994. He placed the plastic toy on his lap over the actual steering column and swore it gave him better handling than any modern vehicle on the current highway system. 8. Waiting times are notoriously bad, but one dramatic citizen took it way too far by pitching a literal pop-up camping tent right next to the front doors. He rolled out a fuzzy sleeping bag and started offering roasted marshmallows to the other miserable people in line who were just trying to renew their tags. 9. Bribery is illegal everywhere, but sliding the examiner a handmade coupon for 3 free aggressive back massages is just deeply uncomfortable. The guy honestly thought physical therapy was the ultimate currency and seemed genuinely offended when the instructor threatened to call the police instead of passing his parking test. 10. Imagine being the poor clerk who had to explain to a grown adult why the government lobby is not a professional esports arena. This unhinged gamer set up a full desktop computer tower on the floor and started throwing a massive tantrum because the free public Wi-Fi was ruining his kill-to-death ratio. 11. Forgery reached a hilarious new low when a woman tried to pass off an expired permit as a valid lifetime pass by taping a magazine cutout of Brad Pitt over her own face. She actually thought the front desk would be too blinded by Hollywood star power to notice the date printed clearly at the bottom. 12. Highway patrol officers were absolutely baffled when a guy drove a loud-riding lawnmower straight into the official testing parking lot. He slammed his fist on the counter and demanded a motorcycle license because his grass-cutting machine had 2 axles and a seat, so technically it was basically a high-speed highway cruiser. 13. Free speech is a beautiful right until some edgy teenager demands a vanity plate consisting entirely of highly offensive dictionary curse words. When the automated computer system obviously flagged the request, he sat on the dirty floor and initiated a dramatic hunger strike that lasted exactly 20 minutes until he got hungry. 14. Supernatural intervention seemed like the only logical strategy for one guy who brought a heavy, glowing crystal ball into the written examination room. He claimed he was gazing into the distant future to find the correct traffic laws, but the proctor just shoved the magical orb into a locker and handed him a failure slip. 15. Disguises are meant to be subtle, but showing up for an official government photo wearing a fake dollar store mustache and neon sunglasses makes you look like a cartoon villain. The applicant screamed about privacy rights when the facial recognition software completely crashed trying to process his ridiculous low-budget spy outfit. 16. Music is supposed to soothe the nerves, but blasting heavy metal from a massive shoulder boombox during a delicate parallel parking test is a terrible strategy. The bass vibrated the tiny test car so violently that it hopped the concrete curb, and the furious instructor immediately terminated the exam before anyone got hurt. 17. Financial logic went completely out the window when a driver tried to cover his expensive registration fees with handwritten promises scribbled on dirty coffee shop napkins. He argued with a straight face that his personal signature was practically gold in the current economy and that the cashier should respect his alternative banking methods. 18. Pet ownership got way out of hand when a woman dragged a massive terrified alpaca into the building claiming it was her certified emotional support vehicle. She honestly requested that the state issue a metal license plate for the animal collar because she planned to ride it down the highway shoulder during rush hour traffic. 19. Security guards had to physically tackle a guy who stood on a plastic chair in the crowded lobby to deliver a loud manifesto against the concept of asphalt roads. He passionately preached that driver licenses were just an elaborate social construct designed to keep the working class from freely roaming the beautiful wilderness. 20. Panic clearly set in for one student who tried to beat the knowledge test by writing all the answers in black Sharpie across his own forehead. He completely forgot that he could not actually see his own face without a mirror, and ended up failing the easiest exam while looking like a total lunatic. 21. A teenager proudly showed up for his official road test, driving a literal funeral hearse complete with a fake plastic skeleton in the back, and he honestly argued that it should allow him to use the carpool lane, but the examiner flat out refused to sit in the death mobile. 22. One woman threw a massive fit at the counter because the clerk refused to Photoshop a digital crown onto her head for her driver license photo. She claimed that she was a sovereign citizen of her own living room and therefore demanded the royal treatment from the state government. 23. There was a guy who decided to protest the long wait times by casually setting up a camping tent right next to the ticket dispenser. He rolled out a sleeping bag and offered to roast marshmallows over a battery-powered heater for anyone willing to trade their lower-numbered ticket. 24. You really have to admire the sheer confidence of the man who tried to pass his motorcycle skills test while riding a fully motorized unicycle. He argued that since it had an engine and a wheel, it legally counted as a bike, but he immediately lost his balance and crashed into a cone. 25. Someone actually brought a certified psychic medium to the registration desk to channel the spirit of the previous car owner just to prove they did not steal the vehicle. The clerk stared in pure disbelief as the psychic started chanting loudly over a completely blank title transfer form. 26. Customer entitlement hit an absolute peak when a furious lady demanded to speak to the regional manager because the staff refused to issue a driver license to her 10-year-old golden retriever. She passionately argued the dog was a safer driver than her ex-husband and had never once received a parking ticket. 27. Just picture a dude trying to pass the written exam by using a very loud walkie-talkie hidden inside a hollowed-out sandwich. His buddy outside was supposed to feed him the answers, but instead accidentally broadcasted a heated argument with a fast food drive-thru worker to the whole room. 28. An absolutely unhinged applicant showed up for their license renewal, fully dressed as a medieval plague doctor complete with a terrifying bird mask. When asked to remove it for the mandatory photograph, he claimed it was an essential medical device to protect him from government microchips. 29. We cannot forget the absolute genius who tried to pay for a duplicate title using a massive jar of assorted casino chips. He confidently slammed the glass jar on the counter and told the cashier to just keep the change as if the state of Nevada was somehow sponsoring his minivan registration. 30. A completely serious guy walked up to the clerk and asked if he could legally register his heavily modified riding vacuum cleaner as a street-legal moped. He even installed little blinkers on the dust bag and thought the highway patrol would totally respect his eco-friendly commute. 31. One angry driver tried to appeal his suspended license by claiming that traffic lights are just colorful suggestions invented by light bulb companies to sell more electricity. The judge at the hearing was so stunned by this wild corporate conspiracy theory that he just stared in total silence. 32. This legendary cheapskate brought his own laminate machine into the waiting area to create his own fake identification cards while sitting right next to a security guard. He honestly thought that if he used official state fonts, no one would notice the laminated paper felt like a restaurant menu. 33. Jedi mind tricks do not work on state employees, but one applicant insisted on taking her driving test with a large blindfold over her eyes to prove she was totally one with the vehicle. The terrified instructor slammed on the emergency brake before she even shifted out of park and politely asked her to leave. 34. You will crack up at the guy who tried to register a stolen golf cart by simply painting over the country club logo with a thick layer of white correction fluid. He then told the suspicious clerk that the vehicle was a custom-built electric hybrid that he inherited from his wealthy grandfather. 35. Someone called the main hotline to complain that the vision test was structurally biased against people who refused to open their eyes. They passionately argued that relying on physical eyesight was an outdated concept and that real drivers navigate the roads using pure instinct and good vibes. 36. A dude thought he could casually bypass the 3-hour line by putting on a high-visibility vest and carrying a random clipboard. He walked straight behind the counter and pretended to inspect the printers until an actual supervisor asked him why he was wearing bedroom slippers to a work site. 37. Only a true rebel would attempt to pay a heavy toll violation by writing out a massive novelty check on a piece of drywall he found in a dumpster. He dragged the heavy board up to the front desk and demanded that the cashier stamp it and hand him a paper receipt for his financial transaction. 38. One lady brought a literal crystal chandelier to the lobby and demanded the staff hang it over her specific waiting chair because the fluorescent tube lights were allegedly draining her spiritual aura. She even brought a ladder and a cordless drill to do the installation herself if necessary. 39. Parallel parking is undeniably tough, but physically getting out of your tiny smart car to push it into the empty space is an automatic failure. This guy looked at the extremely confused examiner with a huge smile and asked if manual override counted for extra points on the final official score sheet. 40. An older gentleman walked in demanding a completely new driver license because he claimed the barcode on the back was secretly broadcasting his favorite soup recipes to his neighbors. He wore a tin foil hat the entire time and refused to speak above a whisper just in case the cameras were listening. 41. This confident teen actually rolled up to his driving test in a bumper car he somehow stole from a local amusement park and wired to a car battery. He argued that the thick rubber bumpers made it the safest vehicle on the road, but the examiner was more worried about the lack of actual seatbelts. 42. A frantic woman begged the clerk to change her legal birth date on her ID by exactly 5 days because her current zodiac sign was causing her to have bad luck with romantic relationships. She even brought an astrology chart printed from the internet to prove that she was meant to be a Leo all along. 43. One absolute legend tried to pay a massive stack of parking tickets using a shoebox filled entirely with vintage collectible trading cards. He slammed a holographic Charizard on the glass counter and confidently told the clerk that this single piece of shiny cardboard would easily cover his entire financial debt to the city. 44. Someone honestly thought it was a brilliant idea to bring a fully functioning fog machine into the waiting area to create a dramatic entrance for when their number was finally called. They completely smoked out the entire lobby and triggered the fire alarms before they even reached the front desk. 45. Musical talent will definitely not get you a license, but this nervous teenager tried to calm his road test anxiety by enthusiastically playing the kazoo every time he successfully completed a turn. The screeching noise was so incredibly irritating that the instructor begged him to stop before they crashed. 46. Your local office is not an art gallery, but one guy completely disagreed and brought a framed oil painting of himself to use for his official identification photo. He argued that the camera lighting always washed out his natural complexion and demanded the clerk just scan the heavy canvas into the government database. 47. A lady refused to sign her application forms with anything other than a brightly colored feather quill. She dipped into a bottle of homemade berry ink. She made a massive purple puddle on the government paperwork and then blamed the clerk for not providing proper parchment paper for a lady of stature. 48. This absolute mastermind tried to beat the vision test by memorizing the entire eye chart from a stolen photo he found on a local community forum. His foolproof plan immediately fell apart when the clerk simply pushed a button that randomly scrambled the digital letters on the screen in front of him. 49. Confidence is key until you try to pass the parallel parking segment using a giant remote control monster truck while standing safely on the sidewalk. The teenager honestly believed that if he could dock the toy car perfectly between two cones, the state would legally grant him permission to drive a real passenger vehicle. 50. You simply will not believe the person who showed up for their renewal photo completely covered in green face paint, claiming to be an alien ambassador. They demanded their license list their home address as a specific crater on the planet Mars, and threw a fit when told to wipe the paint off. 51. Retail hardware store gift cards are not accepted by the federal government, but try telling that to the man who attempted to pay for his commercial driving permit with a massive stack of them. He spent 20 minutes scratching the silver foil off 40 different cards while the line behind him lost their minds. 52. One creative genius attempted to mount a fully sized living room sofa onto the chassis of an old golf cart and tried to register it as a luxury sedan. He bragged about the plush corduroy seating, but the inspector quickly pointed out that a couch does not come equipped with standard airbags or brakes. 53. Fashion emergencies apparently happen at the local office too, because one woman stormed in demanding a refund on her driver license, claiming the plastic card was not compatible with her brand new designer wallet. She honestly expected the state to redesign all official documents to match her spring color palette. 54. Someone brought a noisy portable blender to the waiting area and started making loud protein smoothies right next to the information desk. They accidentally forgot to put the lid on securely and sprayed sticky banana liquid all over a stack of brand new learner permit applications sitting nearby. 55. A completely delusional applicant tried to argue that speed limits do not apply to him because his car is painted red, and red is scientifically proven to be a fast color. The clerk just slowly blinked at him and handed over a heavy stack of unpaid speeding tickets that he somehow managed to accumulate. 56. This guy actually showed up to take his written exam wearing a full scuba diving suit, including the heavy oxygen tank strapped to his back. He claimed the compressed air helped oxygenate his brain for better thinking, but he could barely fit through the door with massive rubber flippers on his feet. 57. One extremely confident woman tried to take her driving test while simultaneously knitting a massive wool sweater for her grandson. She tried to steer the wheel using only her knees while aggressively clacking her knitting needles together until the terrified instructor slammed on the passenger brake. 58. Legal signatures are usually pretty boring, until this absolute legend demanded that his official digital signature be legally changed to a highly detailed drawing of a cartoon dog eating a hot dog. He spent 10 entire minutes carefully sketching the artwork and was deeply offended when the machine automatically rejected it. 59. You really have to wonder about the person who tried to register a child-sized plastic tricycle as a legitimate secondary vehicle. They argued that because it had pedals and wheels, it was technically a zero-emissions hybrid and deserved a special state tax credit for environmental sustainability. 60. An angry customer loudly threatened to sue the entire department because the generic waiting room chairs did not provide adequate lumbar support for his sensitive back. He actually unrolled a yoga mat on the dirty tile floor and started doing intense stretches right in front of the payment windows. 61. Only a true visionary would attempt to register a massive inflatable bouncy castle as a legitimate mobile recreational vehicle. He strapped the deflated vinyl to a flatbed trailer and proudly argued with the inspector that the massive plastic slide was essentially a built-in emergency exit system for high-speed highway driving. 62. Can you imagine the sheer audacity of the woman who walked right up to the payment counter and slapped down a massive stack of arcade tokens? She passionately explained that since the local arcade went bankrupt, her high scores were practically equal to federal currency in the current economy. 63. During a routine vision exam, one applicant claimed his eyesight was so incredibly advanced that he could not read the letters because they were glowing with radiation. He demanded the staff turn off all the monitors and let him read a physical paper chart in absolute total darkness instead. 64. That absolute madman who tried to bribe his driving instructor with a mixtape of his own terrible amateur rap songs really thought he was a genius. He locked the car doors and blasted his homemade tracks at maximum volume, until the terrified examiner promised to give him a passing score just to escape. 65. Never underestimate the confidence of a guy who rolled up to the road test operating a commercial Zamboni he borrowed from the local ice rink. He looked the examiner dead in the eye and asked if he needed to demonstrate his parallel parking skills on solid asphalt or if they should find a frozen lake. 66. Out of pure desperation, a college student tried to pass the written knowledge exam by actively shaking a plastic magic 8-ball for every single multiple-choice question. The room echoed with the sound of rattling liquid until the supervisor finally confiscated the toy and handed him a blank failure slip. 67. There is always that one person who thinks they found a legal loophole by wearing a metal pasta strainer on their head for their official photo. He sternly warned the clerk that denying his right to wear kitchen appliances would result in a massive lawsuit funded by his very obscure pasta-based religion. 68. To avoid paying a hefty late fee on his registration, a local theater actor walked in pretending to be a 19th century ghost who had just awoken from a cursed slumber. He spoke entirely in a fake British accent and feigned absolute terror at the sight of the electronic ticket dispenser on the wall. 69. Completely ignoring all basic common sense, a woman tried to legally change her primary address to a specific fictional castle from her favorite fantasy novel. She slammed a heavily illustrated map on the desk and yelled at the manager for not recognizing a magical kingdom as a valid residential zone. 70. Who in their right mind brings a full-size tabletop grill to the lobby just to cook hot dogs while waiting for ticket number 400 to be called? Security was absolutely baffled when he offered them a freshly charred sausage in exchange for letting him bypass the massive line out the front door. 71. Believe it or not, somebody actually tried to register a homemade time machine built out of crushed energy drink cans and a broken microwave. He demanded a special interdimensional license plate and warned the staff that if they refused, he would simply travel back to yesterday and cancel their lunch breaks. 72. Confronted with a basic parallel parking test, this teenager simply panicked and glued a tablet to his steering wheel so he could watch a tutorial video in real time. The instructor was utterly speechless as the kid repeatedly paused the video to calculate the exact geometric angle of his back right tire. 73. Just when you think you have heard it all, a guy submitted his application forms completely written in a made-up alien language he invented in his basement. He insisted the state of California was legally obligated to hire a universal translator just to process his request for a standard motorcycle permit. 74. Take a moment to process the logic of a woman who tried to renew the driver license of her deceased great-grandfather so she could use his senior citizen discount at the grocery store. She honestly thought propping up his ancient framed portrait on the counter would count as his physical presence. 75. Furious about a $50 ticket, an angry mechanic tried to pay the exact penalty amount by handing over an extremely heavy and rusted engine block. He dropped the massive chunk of metal directly onto the fragile tile floor and declared his financial debt completely settled before walking out the door. 76. Nobody could figure out why a grown man showed up for his photo appointment dressed head to toe in a green spandex morph suit that covered his entire face. He smugly told the clerk that his outfit was scientifically designed to make him completely invisible to those annoying red light traffic cameras. 77. Honestly, the bravest clerk in the world had to deal with a customer who tried to use a Blockbuster video rental card from 1996 as his primary birth certificate. The guy yelled that his Elite Gold membership status proved he was a responsible American citizen who always rewound his VHS tapes. 78. We literally have camera footage of a guy who brought his own personal mime to the customer service window to aggressively translate his complaints into physical gestures. The clerk had to sit there for 10 minutes watching a man trapped in an imaginary glass box before finally calling the security guards. 79. Criminal masterminds usually lay low, but this particular car thief boldly decided to register a stolen vehicle while the actual furious owner was standing right next to him at the adjacent window reporting the crime. The criminal even tried to argue that Finder Keepers was a legitimate federal law to the arriving police. 80. If you ever feel dumb, just remember the lady who showed up wearing a giant neck brace and fake arm cast to gain sympathy from the line, but then had to actually drive her car for the road test. She miraculously healed the second the instructor told her she was physically unfit to operate a motor vehicle. 81. Have you ever seen someone try to bribe a government official with an entire wheel of imported cheese? Because that actually happened last Tuesday in a Midwestern office. The man pushed the giant dairy product across the desk and whispered that a clean driving record was worth its weight in aged cheddar. 82. Make sure you never try to argue with the examiner that stop signs with white borders are strictly optional and only apply to commercial delivery trucks. This arrogant driver confidently blew straight through an intersection and then demanded the instructor apologize for not knowing secret maritime travel laws. 83. Sometimes people forget that a Hollywood prop badge purchased from a novelty tourist shop does not grant you instant diplomatic immunity from paying your vehicle taxes. The guy literally flashed a plastic sheriff star and demanded the cashier salute him before processing his paperwork free of any state charges. 84. Right in the middle of a very crowded room, an aspiring entrepreneur decided to set up a small folding table to sell homemade phone cases to the miserable people waiting in line. He even offered a discount to anyone who failed their written exam, until the branch manager threatened him with a trespassing charge. 85. Rather than bringing normal proof of insurance, a very confused teenager handed the clerk a hand-drawn portrait of his family standing next to a generic blue sedan. He passionately explained that his mother promised to pay for any accidents, so the drawing was essentially a binding legal contract of financial trust. 86. When asked to provide a valid signature, this absolute joker spent 5 minutes meticulously stamping a bright red wax seal onto the digital electronic signing pad. He actually brought a lighter and a stick of medieval wax into the building, just to prove he was a man of immense aristocratic importance and wealth. 87. What kind of person demands a full cash refund for the gasoline they burned while driving to the DMV to pay for a parking ticket they definitely deserved? This woman literally brought a handwritten invoice for $3.50 and threatened to contact the Supreme Court if she was not reimbursed. 88. Imagine the total chaos when a frantic guy accidentally dropped a very realistic-looking rubber snake onto the counter while digging for his wallet. 3 different clerks screamed and jumped onto their spinning office chairs, while the man casually laughed and said his pet python just wanted to say hello. 89. Very few things are funnier than a guy who thinks he can pass the official motorcycle skills test by attaching 2 stolen leaf blowers to a pair of vintage rollerblades. He zoomed across the asphalt parking lot at terrifying speeds before losing his balance and crashing spectacularly into a massive stack of orange traffic cones. 90. For some unknown reason, an elderly gentleman walked in wearing a perfectly tailored tuxedo and immediately demanded VIP bottle service and a leather booth. He firmly believed that because he was paying over $200 in commercial registration fees, the state owed him a complimentary glass of champagne. 91. As a last resort to avoid failing his eye exam, a man confidently claimed he had echolocation abilities like a bat and did not need to visually see the letters. He just stood there, aggressively clicking his tongue at the wall chart, and told the stunned nurse to mark him down for perfect 20/20 hearing. 92. To show ultimate defiance, a guy handcuffed himself to the front desk just because the state rejected his highly inappropriate vanity plate. He threw the key down a nearby storm drain and loudly declared a one-man revolution against the censorship of crude bumper sticker humor right in front of the local news cameras. 93. Did you know someone actually tried to pay their massive stack of moving violations with a supposedly winning lottery ticket from a completely different country? He argued the exchange rate would make the department incredibly rich, but the clerk quickly noticed the ticket expired back in 1998. 94. Try to wrap your head around the logic of the teenager who brought a fully loaded karaoke machine to sing his apologies to the suspension committee. He belted out a terrible rendition of a classic pop song, hoping the judges would be so moved by his vocal range that they would instantly return his driving privileges. 95. Only an absolute sociopath would attempt to use a heavy-duty construction forklift as their primary testing vehicle for a standard Class C permit. He smiled wildly and offered to lift the examiner vehicle out of a tight parking spot just to prove his incredible mastery of heavy industrial hydraulic machinery. 96. You simply cannot ignore the guy who brought a massive battery-powered megaphone to aggressively announce his own ticket number every 3 minutes to the entire lobby. He claimed the electronic screen was clearly broken and took it upon himself to ensure the public was fully aware of his exact queue position. 97. Vehicle safety is important, but wrapping your entire four-door sedan in thick industrial bubble wrap before a road test is completely unhinged. The instructor had to spend 20 minutes explaining that covering the main windshield in plastic packaging material was actually a massive safety hazard for everyone involved. 98. Without a hint of irony, a woman tried to legally change the color of her car on her registration from silver to emotional sunset orange because of its specific aura. She told the very exhausted staff member that machines have feelings too, and her sedan was currently experiencing a deep spiritual awakening. 99. Nothing screams genius like a dude trying to pass a commercial truck driving test while wearing a giant pirate eye patch over his dominant eye for fashion purposes. He hit the curb 3 separate times before the angry tester forced him to remove the costume accessory and actually use his binocular depth perception. 100. In a truly legendary display of ignorance, a man tried to register a heavily armed decommissioned military tank as a daily commuter vehicle for his short drive to work. He politely asked if the cannon on top violated any local emission standards and wondered if he could get a special discount for driving a hybrid. 101. Our final absolutely unhinged maniac is the guy who legally changed his name to a barcode symbol and demanded the DMV staff physically scan his arm to print his new license. When the grocery store scanner he brought from home obviously failed to work, he threw a massive tantrum about the lack of technological progress. I want to know exactly which of these 101 disasters you would actually try if you knew you would not get arrested. Confess your crimes in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button and like the video, because we expose this level of human stupidity every single week and you need the laughs. Also, YouTube only gives you 3 hype buttons a week, so spend one on this masterpiece right now.